Hi, and welcome to the When Women Fly podcast. Each episode, I have poignant conversations with women who fly, run, surf, ski, climb, or otherwise soar, and possess a passion for life that is infectious. These are honest and insightful conversations about dreams and reinvention, often in the face of uncertainty, doubt, or other impediments. We talk about busting paradigms, grit, working hard, and playing hard, all while building a community around the empowering metaphor of flight. I am your host, Sylvia Winter, a pilot, runner, mother, skier, list maker, and apparently podcaster. I believe that when we share our stories, own our fears, and dismantle our perceived limitations, the possibilities are boundless. Whether you're pursuing your passion or simply love the idea of possibility and wonder, this podcast is for you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Let's get started. This week, I am talking to Dr. Edy Greenblatt, author, lover of dance, trapeze, and water sports, entrepreneur, and executive coach about resilience, the flying fear couple, the anatomy of burnout, and so much more. The spirit of flight takes on many forms, and in this episode, we celebrate the multifaceted journey of a teacher, scholar, and leader who is first a dancer. We talk about being a fusioneer, integrating ethnography, dance, and aerial arts with management, leadership, social psychology, and common sense. We also talk about the power of energy and embodiment in the context of learning, managing personal energy resources, taking steps in our lives, and making choices that allow us to show up for ourselves and the work we do. Edy Greenblatt is adorned with awards and accolades for being a global authority on using physical experiences, dance, aerobatics, and the flying trapeze to enhance work performance and team effectiveness. She developed an executive program that uses world dance to help embody and teach leadership concepts that are otherwise difficult to deal with and sometimes to see. Dr. Edy has a master's in psychology and a joint Ph.D. in organizational behavior from Harvard Business School and the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, also a master's in dance ethnology. Edy's book, Restore Yourself, The Antidote for Professional Exhaustion, serves as a primer on living in the age of perpetual depletion. I needed to hear what Edy had to say. I continued to reflect on the paradigm she presents about the anatomy of burnout and how important it is to really understand what restores and what depletes us, independent of the work and non-work categorization. Edy is a joy to connect with, and a wealth of warmth and insight spills into this conversation. I believe a fresh perspective on resilience and the power of physical movement on brain health and well-being is something we can all use. So for that reason, and specifically how aerobatics and the flying trapeze commingle with life, I am excited to welcome you today, Dr. Edy Greenblatt.
Thank you, Sylvia. It's a pleasure to meet you and hear you here.
You have been training teams for over 20 years using your blended knowledge and skills in the movement arts, business, and organizational behavior to see problems and leadership solutions that others do not. And we're going to dive into your work on resiliency, dance, and movement in the flying trapeze. But first, I'd like to hear about your upbringing and the role that dance played in your budding years.
Oh, thank you for asking that question. I like to say that pretty much everything good in my life, or most of the things good in my life, came from dancing. When I was 8, my mother took us to the Jewish Community Center, and we didn't have a lot of discretionary money. And so there were only a few free classes that came with the membership. And one of them was international folk dancing. Since my mother's good years in Romania before World War II involved her doing some Romanian traditional dances, she thought that might be fun. I started dancing, and very quickly I was identified by the teacher as somebody who not only loved it but was good. Within a year, they were teaching me how to teach. I mean, I was a 10-year-old learning how to be a dance teacher.
What is it that they saw in you that quickly became something they wanted to teach you how to teach?
So this was kind of what we would now call world dance. So we were doing different dances from different parts, predominantly Europe, North America, the US. Very few dances from Asia, almost nothing from Africa, a little bit of South Africa, South American. But the trick to really dancing those dances well is to change styles. It's just like when you're speaking Spanish, you don't speak with a Bulgarian accent. And so if you're dancing a Bulgarian dance, you don't want to dance it with a Mexican accent. I seem to have a propensity and a preference for matching physical movement styles identically. So if you took a native Bulgarian dancer and had him teach me a dance, most of the teachers were men in those days, had him teach me a Bulgarian dance, I would actually look like a Bulgarian doing it as opposed to an American trying to look like a Bulgarian. I didn't know this was a trick, but it turns out that it's not common,
Hmm,
and it's kind of become part of who I am, which is I don't need to remain me. I'm very happy to simply blend in and support and become whatever is necessary to accomplish the goal of the group.
hmm. And do you do that intuitively?
Yeah,
Hmm. And so you went on to study dance, and that your known trajectory?
not at all. I was always interested in medicine. I wanted to be a physician. I started UCLA. I was pre-biology, pre-med, and nobody told me that you have to sort of take a normal order of classes. So I just looked in the schedule and picked all kinds of cool things like upper division dance history and cerebral creation and interesting things in addition to biology, chemistry, English, all the things I had to. I left school a couple of times. I was sick once. Well, there were financial challenges. And at one point, I just left and went to dance in Macedonia because someone said I should.
Mhm.
By that time, I was already teaching dancing. I was teaching dancing to adults, and I was an adult by that time. So they said, "Listen, you're kind of much the best in the business, but until you've spent time in the Balkans, nobody's going to call you a world-class Balkan dancer." So I left. When I came back, I discovered world arts and cultures. So I was world arts and cultures pre-med, and so I did all the dance stuff in addition to music, dance, theater, folklore, mythology, art, and anthropology. Well, I did the full pre-med curriculum at UCLA. And yeah, what I did in my free time was sleep and work.
And so you were teaching during that time that you started that pre-med?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started teaching dancing to adults when I was 12.
I think about the quote, "We teach best what we most need to learn." How does that apply to you during that time?
During that time, it wasn't related. I taught because people told me to teach. I know how to lead. I teach leadership.
Mhm.
My favorite thing to do is follow.
Hmm.
So if somebody who was a mentor or an authority or an adult or a good dancer said, "Why don't you do this?" I'd go, "Okay."
Mhm.
I got a PhD because a colleague of mine said, "Oh, you ought to go get a PhD in organizational behavior. That sounds like that'll work for you." And I went, "Well, okay."
Okay, so that's a great segue. So tell me more about that pivot. So you were pre-med, and then things changed.
So I was pre-biology, pre-med, and I left and I came back and I went back world arts and cultures pre-med and did all of that, applied to med school. Right around the same time I was applying to med school, my mother took a fall when I was 20 and sort of it was the beginning of a very bad 35 years,
Mm.
40 years almost probably. 30 years. So by the time I was applying to med schools, she was in the hospital having surgery on the first problem that it took us 7 years to solve, and, I was spending a lot of time in hospitals and with the medical system, and I realized that I applied to med school, I got in, but I was also offered a full scholarship and extraordinary funding for a dance person into the, master's program in dance with a specialty in dance ethnology, which is dance anthropology, the study of dance as human behavior from an ethnographic interdisciplinary perspective.
Hmm.
So, turned down med school and did dance. I thought, you need to do dance when you're younger. You can always sit and learn medical stuff.
Mhm.
But in the process of helping my mother figure out what was wrong with her, I had done a huge amount of studies on the side. So I actually dropped out of UCLA another time to study anatomy and physiology and advanced anatomy so I could help the doctors figure out what was wrong with my mother because they weren't doing such a good job of it.
And was that period of time your first experience with burnout?
I never burnt out. My mother, unlike people, so having burnt out doesn't mean you know anything about burnout except you know the pain of it.
Mhm.
My mother suffered from work-related stuff, and my mother was in concentration camp. My mother had a very difficult time. My father had a very difficult time. He had challenges in mental illness at a time when nobody understood mental illness except really my mother and my grandmother, who were 20 years ahead on diagnosing the neurobiological fundamentals of mental illness.
Hmm.
They had it figured out in the 50s because they read medical journals and were like wicked smart. And nobody figured that out till they found the opiate receptor on the cell wall in the 70s. So I watched my mother and my father both in different ways suffer from physically, cognitively, emotionally suffering and not having anybody help them. I never burnt out.
Hmm.
I actually left the field and said, "Listen, I'm tired of dancing. I don't really know how to keep going and do this and work any harder than I am." Not burnt out, but just sort of saying, "Well, I need to do something else."
Mhm.
So I'm not someone who said, I can't afford to burn out. I never could. I had to take care of a sick mom, and I got lucky. I had knowledge and help, but I didn't have a lot of help. I got lucky.
So since we touched on resilience, we'll talk about it more, but as you said, it has been kicked around quite a bit now, and you study it, and you have before it was kind of cool. When you say resilience, what do you mean?
Thanks for asking. So there are multiple definitions of resilience. So the early conversations around resilience in the literature, it was a term used in psychology to talk about people who are having traumatic experiences and the ability to recover from a traumatic psychological experience or a physical experience that caused trauma, psychological, emotional trauma. If you Google resilience prior, if you'll see lots of research on that. So psychological resilience, the ability to bounce back from some kind of traumatic episode. My research and my work and my view of having the energy to do what you need to do, broadly defined, has to do with managing yourself and being okay broadly. So we are beings, and you can cut it all kinds of ways, right? But a simple way to cut it is we have energy and physical energy and what I call personal resources. We have physical resources, we have cognitive resources, right? The ability to think and solve problems. We have physical resources, the ability to heal, the ability to stay awake, right? We have physical energies. We have emotional and social and psychological resources and energy. The ability either to tap energies within ourselves or to use and take advantage of energy that is available to us. So imagine you're running a marathon and you are really out of gas and the crowd is cheering. The ability to take that, channel it, to turn it, convert it into the capacity to continue. That's not energy embedded in me, it's the ability to convert. So for me, resilience is the capacity to have or find or convert, to obtain and have access to the energy we need to do what's important to us.
Mhm.
And managing your personal resources or your energies is the active, intentional management of that.
Mhm.
So that's what I call personal resource management because it was part of a dissertation. If it wasn't, it would be called energy, right? Right? How do you have energy, right?
Yeah.
But it had to, it needed to be a little more specific.
I think it's really interesting how you couch resilience in energy management. I'll call it the personal resource management, because I think it can sort of become more academic. And perhaps that's because of the context of your background, where it seems like you really moved through the world through your movement and your physical energy. So that became kind of the logical way that you looked at resilience. So I'd love to hear more about how you got into this double PhD program, why, and what you were looking for. At that point, you clearly had some goals in mind, I would think.
My goal was I did the master's in dance anthropology because I wanted to teach. I've been, again, when they started training me to be a teacher from the time I was a kid. I taught swimming, I taught dancing, I tutored math. I loved teaching. It made me happy. I was good at it. People were happy when I did it. So it became, and then when I started the master's program in dance, the first thing they did was they gave me classes to teach. That doesn't happen to first year graduate students, but I'd been teaching the stuff in the community, right, to adults. I was teaching it other environments. So I wanted to teach in university. I decided, okay, I'll teach in university and colleges. And then I did that. So I kind of reached the top of what I could reach in the dance world and said, and I'm doing everything I can with all the time I've got. And I ran the numbers and it was unsustainable. By that time, I was supporting my mother's household and her well being, and my household and my well being. And I needed to do something that was gonna be more reliable. Also, I became aware that adults who were coming to my recreational classes weren't coming to dance, that I was providing broad-based restorative behaviors and conditions that help people get through, the bout of cancer and the death of their daughters. And I had one student who, came to me and said, "Because of your class, I take my lithium and I'm managing my mental illness." And I slowly realized that what I was doing was helping people manage the damage caused by work and life.
Hmm.
So it wasn't just learning. Okay, so I was creating social conditions and educational situations and movement, but I was creating a multidisciplinary environment in which people were restoring themselves. And so when it became clear that I needed and wanted to do something else, I wanted to get on the other side of it. So why don't we just stop making work damaging?
Hmm.
By definition, right? We work to have good lives. So the act of working should not make our lives worse. It should make our lives better.
Hmm.
And it didn't have to be that way. And it didn't have to be that way for my mom, who suffered because of, the organization didn't understand what they needed to do to help her be okay a few times. My father worked for his family. They didn't understand that the conditions they were creating in the organization were contributing to his non well being.
Hmm.
Right. So it became clear, and it wasn't clear that I had those ties in my family. That was an afterthought. I figured it out later. Decided I wanted to get on the other side of it. And then an old dance buddy said, "Well, you're an ethnographer in organizational behavior and in looking at organizations and how teams and organizations operate. Ethnographic studies is hip. They need you. You know more about culture than the people who are studying organizational culture.
Hmm.
You know more about ethnographic processes. So don't get an MBA, because I thought I'll get an MBA and I'll go do business and make more money. And he said, no, don't get an MBA. Go get a PhD, and you like teaching, and be a professor. You'll go be a professor."
Hmm. But you did do the MBA program at Harvard as part of your PhD?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I went to Harvard, not only because of the brand and the financial aid, but they required we do the required curriculum of the MBA.
Hmm.
They didn't let us do the second year. That wasn't part of it, because once you do that, then you go get a job, right? You don't finish your PhD and go, "Oh my God, I'm going to work for free for the next 4 years." You go take the big McKinsey consulting gig.
Right.
So I did the first year, which was amazing, because why would I want to ever teach MBAs if I'd never been one? I'm an ethnographer. I learned by embodying the topic. I'm a dancer. I'm a flyer. I fly on the trapeze. Learning has to be embodied. So why on earth would I ever think that I could teach MBAs anything if I hadn't been one?
Uh-huh. Okay, so then what was the core of your research during that time?
So the core of the research is actually what ended up in the book, and it's the personal resource management works. I wanted to find an environment in which we could study how people restore and how they deplete themselves, and what prevents burnout, and how people survive in difficult conditions. I used to go to Club Med. I worked as a travel agent while I was in school, and I taught dance. And I went to Club Med and I went, "Oh my God, this is, reliably restorative for me." And I found the flying trapeze. I walked into the village, and there was a flying trapeze, and I said, "That's the most powerful educational instrument ever. Don't let anybody get to this before I finish my PhD." And then I got on it. I didn't even have to get on it. I knew. I knew my all my movement, and I also swim. I swim. And so all of my movement bells and whistles went off. My instinct said, "That's going to be, amazing for me." And turned out it was. So what I saw was that Club Med workers were living and working in paradise, right? People go on vacation, and they were turning over at 90% a year. And there were some people who were able to survive that lifestyle, 6.5 days on, half a day off for 6 months at a time. And it was before people talked about 24/7 working,
Mhm.
that that's what they were doing. It's when we talked about Goffman's work on asylums and total institutions. So I decided to do my research there, because we had people burning out under conditions that everybody thought was ideal. Like, if I could only have, if I could only have an office by the beach and, have gourmet food, gourmet buffets every day, I'd be fine. No. So it was a closed community. It was like a laboratory.
Mhm.
Everybody ate the same food, worked under the same conditions, lived in the same place. Nobody had family issues. Nobody had to walk the dog. Nobody was taking care of their sick parents. This was a laboratory,
Mhm.
and it was fun, and it was warm, and the weather was good.
So your study group consisted of the people that burned out and the people that didn't, and you were trying to understand what went into that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, what I did was this is participant observation, ethnography. I went in and I actually went in and worked as a geo, as the camp counselors, right?
Of course you did.
Of course I did. So, I went and worked on the water ski dock, worked with the rollerblades and gave out whatever they gave me to do. I did whatever they had me do, and interviewed people. And we did, grounded research, interviews, participant observation, surveys. Yeah, I mean, really did some serious stuff and gathered a lot of data. The club was wonderful. The geos were remarkable, and I got to fly a little bit and learned how to juggle. And
Okay, so let's talk about the moment that you saw the flying trapeze and what ensued and how that became such a core of your work and still is now part of your own practice.
thanks. It was more than 20 years ago, and there were very few flying trapezes anywhere outside of a circus. Club Med was one of the first places to provide commercial flying trapeze as a recreational sport. I saw the rig, I saw people flying. I said, I want to do that. There was just no question. So first thing I did was I went to the rig and I found out what time the class was, and I went and I flew once, and that was it. I just wanted to fly. It's complex movement that requires collaboration, that has unbelievable support. You're never safer than when you're on a trapeze. Sounds funny, right?
Hmm.
Okay, so I'm on belay. I'm wearing a safety harness. I'm hooked onto belay. I climb the ladder, holding onto the ladder and climbing on a one-way belay. I get to the top. They switch my lines to someone who's on a manual belay. I'm standing on the board. I'm holding on to a device that can support 3 cars. I'm on manual belay and I'm holding a bar over a net. So even though my brain is telling me I'm gonna die, I am I'm safer than it's safer than taking a shower. Statistically, it's the same, injury rate as ping pong. And there are 3 people who are dedicated to doing nothing but taking care of me.
Hmm.
And they're teaching me, and I love to follow. So this is everything that reliably restores me. Movement, support, safety, challenge, complex movement, and collaboration, right? I was like, okay, there's no, and I'm in the air.
Hmm. So what is happening to you when you are flying in the trapeze? Like what are you actually doing?
There are exercises or tricks.
Hmm.
They're called tricks.
Hmm.
And there is a progression, right, in skills.
And you're hanging from your knees.
Well, that's the first trick.
Okay.
And that's the trick that everybody learns first. So at the beginning, you don't do things by yourself, right? You have more. So
Hmm.
you're holding on the bar, you jump off the bar, you jump off the platform, you swing passively, right? Because, right, you swing. When you're told, you hang your knees on the bar. So you roll backward, hang your knees on the bar. When you're told if you are safely secure on the bar, you're told to release your hands. So now you're hanging by your knees with your hands extended near you. Like, think of your elbows near your ears, and you swing back, right? The bar is swinging.
Hmm.
And when you're told, you put your hands back, that's your knee hang. And then when you're swinging, you're told to put your hands back on the bar, and then you lower your knees, and now you're just hanging from the bar. This is all on command at the proper time, and then you land in the net. That's the first trick. And then they help you get off the net, and your neurotransmitters go wild, right?
Hmm.
From the time you climb the ladder till the time you get in the net. And there are sort of, 2 responses. Oh my God, this is great. And I'm never ever gonna do that again.
So you're either addicted to that release of endorphins and all of the feel good chemistry that happens when you have this fear that you are confronting and you do the thing and you're still alive and you go back for more and you can measure your improvement and you're in a community and you then take the flying trapeze to the business world. And this is where I need you to make this liaison and help enlighten us how you have navigated the taking something like flying trapeze and dance into coaching and sort of this high level of executive presence, which is really addressing burnout and performance in workplace.
Let's take something that's kind of easy to understand. Flying trapeze is something that's done one person at a time.
Mhm.
In order to do it, however, you need a team of at least 3 or 4 people manning the rig helping you do it. So, there's a team. If I wanna achieve great things, if my personal goal is to do a knee hang, we're a team. What are the roles of the people? Okay? So, if I use the flying trapeze and let's say you've brought your team of 12 guys from a big investment bank. Okay. So, here's your goal. Your goal is to put on a show. That's your goal. All right. How are you going to do it? I can create a fake scenario or I can actually create a real scenario. I create a live case. We create live cases and we're not just creating a live case, but we're actually creating a live case in an environment that reveals business phenomena that normally aren't seen or discussed. I'll give you an example if you're okay with that.
Oh, yeah, please.
Okay. It's very common. So the first person climbs the ladder, right? So we do ground school.
Mhm.
This is what's going to happen. This is what you're going to do when you're up there. This is how you get on the net. This is how you get off the net. This is how you get on the board. This is how you jump. This is how you hold. Let's practice on the low bar. This is how you'll hang your knees. Everything's done on the ground. We tell you exactly what's going to happen. Okay. Got it? Yep. Got it? Yep. When I say hep, you're going to jump. Yep. Yeah. Okay. When I say hep, you do things. Yeah. Okay. Got it? Yes. Okay. Fine. First person climbs the ladder. You get them in position. Okay. Ready? Hep. Nothing happens. Okay. Ready? Hep. Nothing happens. So the guy on the safety lines in the bottom is calling. The guy who's up on the board holding the person's belt and helping them
Mhm.
at some point says, "Okay, I'm going to say hep, and you're going to go ready. One, two, three, up." And they help, like wiggle your feet off the platform.
Uh-huh.
And okay, fine. All right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, knees up now. Hep. There. Let go. Hep. The person's still hanging there. Hep. Let go. Hep. Nothing happens. Ah! The person lets go. Everybody on the ground laughs hysterically, right? Ah, okay. This happens, there's 12 people and it happens to 3 of them. And you say, "Well, why didn't you let go when I said hep?" He said, "You didn't tell me." "Why didn't you jump when I said hep?" I didn't hear you say hep, but we have the video. Right? We play it back. Look, what we know from neuropsychopharmacology and from human behavior is that when you put people under stress, sometimes they just don't hear.
Mhm.
Now, I can tell you that in classroom and you'll go, yeah, 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 yeah. But once you've seen that 3 times happening to people like you, including yourself, then you understand that when you have a new employee and you explain to them exactly what they should do in the presentation, and they get up to do the presentation and it's gone.
Mhm.
They don't remember. They don't hear. You didn't tell me that. You didn't tell me that. You didn't tell me that you needed me to call you up, right? So the trapeze is so complex an exercise
Mhm.
that it reveals human behavior, physical, cognitive, psychological, in a way which, and then people see themselves in the video, they go, "Oh my God, I didn't hear you." Like, okay, great.
Yeah.
So it creates a living case that is remarkably effective. And what makes this different from ropes courses, right, is that very few people have done it. And it's not easier if you're bigger or stronger or male or older or younger. It actually requires people who are listening and paying attention. So the skills that really matter in the business setting, as opposed to, the biggest, strongest guy does the best work. And so now it's not fair when you train people that way.
Yeah. So it seems like it really short circuits to one's ability to be present and manage the stress response. Because I can imagine the not hearing is also a version of freezing, right? You kind of can reveal to the team what can go on during stress and other circumstances. It's really interesting. Are there other findings that play out in the workplace that have to do with interpersonal challenges that the flying really is a good response to?
Yeah. Can I just comment on one more thing that you mentioned at the individual level, and then I'll get to the interpersonal.
Oh, please.
Not only is it about managing stress, It's also there's another message which I think is hugely important, and I use this for individual personal development, not just for team effectiveness. Right. So the content we do, we'll do leadership, we'll do team effectiveness, we'll do resilience, we'll do personal development, right? Again, depending if I know the content, if I'm a professional of the content, then we can usually adapt that tool, right? That delivery system to deliver that. One of the really important messages, I think, which is counterintuitive or counterculture, is normally we say, well, when people are afraid, they're not going to perform as well. So manage your fear, right? You need to just not be afraid and do it. Well, that's actually not true. I mean, if you can be less afraid, that's always good. But we do remarkable things terrified, right? So
Mhm.
when you're 3 stories in the air over a net and someone says, like, jump off the platform, if your brain doesn't say, I'm going to die, you're an evolutionary failure. Your brain should say, I'm going to die. All right. The question is, what do you do after your brain says, I'm going to die? Right. And it turns out that you can do amazing things scared out of your mind with your stress hormones fly, right? There are very few people, there's probably a million people by now, let's say hundreds of thousands of people who have done a knee hang on the flying trapeze. And probably 90% of them were scared out of their mind at the time.
Mhm.
But that didn't stop them from accomplishing things that they had no idea they could do, right? And then landing safely, and many of them said, "Woohoo, let's do it again." So at the individual level, there's an extraordinary message there that for me was very important personally, which is, "Oh, okay, if I'm scared out of my mind, I'll be okay anyway," right?
Very transferable to other areas of life.
Yeah, especially since we live in a world which is scary, right? Really scary. So at you then where you asked about the team level, I believe. The interpersonal level.
Yeah, these are the takeaways that the team would have.
Yeah, I'll tell you an interpersonal story. So interpersonally, there's a message there. So we've got 12 people, and one of them flew on the trapeze at Club Med once 10 years ago, and nobody else, and somebody else was a diver, a platform diver, maybe in college, and everybody else has never been that high up. Or one of them used to fix roofs, right? So he's been up there a lot. Okay, fine.
Mhm,
So, but there's nobody who's an expert at this, right?
mhm.
So the first person goes up and they fly, and the second person goes up, and everybody takes a turn. By the time we're in halfway through the first set of turns, or at least for sure by the time we're in the second set of turns, the people downstairs are calling out advice. Like, hold on, leave them, look forward. What the hell do you know? You've done this once. You know nothing about this. And there are 2 to 3 people available to coach. There's the person on the safety lines who is actually calling the trick. And there's the person on the board who is also an expert. And somebody just walked you through ground school. Like, you need help, but people want to help and they want to share their experience.
Mhm,
And they start calling out instruction
mhm,
without stopping to think, am I really adding value? Does the person really need this? And this happens in the dance leadership stuff as well. It's hysterical. I can tell you the dance training equivalent of this, but it's the same thing. So we have interpersonal preferences and beliefs that you're like, oh, and if you look at Marshall Goldsmith's work on, what got you here, what won't get you there, right? One of the problems of leaders that they overuse, a skill they overuse is, adding too much value.
mhm.
The best thing you could do for this person is shut up and shoot a video of them.
So is this like assuming you're an expert because you've done something one time or it's apparently easy?
I don't know what drives it. I just know that it happens.
Uh-huh.
And when we add value, before we open our mouths in a team setting or before we're trying to help, it's sort of good to determine if the recipient would like the support or the help.
Let me ask you about any gender differences that you've observed in this process. I speak in a sense thinking about the research that's done, sure you're familiar with, which positions that women are much less likely to apply for a job until they're fully meeting the requirements, whereas men will apply if they're whatever percent qualified and just walk in the door. So I'm wondering if you see any of that and how you reflect on that.
So, first of all, my friend Sally Helgeson has written a great book with Michelle Goldsmith on when women lead. She's the expert on the women stuff. I've seen a little bit, but she's phenomenally knowledgeable and a wonderful human being. So what we do know is that women will there's a book called, Women Don't Ask also,
Mm,
another useful book. So, yes, women will underestimate their readiness to take on a professional challenge, exactly as you said. I don't see that in the trapeze because everyone who has agreed to do it has agreed to do it, and the team's agreed to do it. What their performance expectations, are they met more often than men's? Yeah. So, I don't think these women underestimate themselves in a physical activity. I think more culturally, men believe that their strength, their physical strength,
mhm,
will carry them through on something that looks like it's a pull up.
mhm,
So I think it's more about believing in your physical strength on the trapeze. In dancing, you've got the opposite
mm,
because at least in North America, men do not men are choreophobic, right? They grow up believing that they really can't dance unless they grew up in Latin communities, much less so.
mhm,
And in the African American community, it's uneven. It depends, but in sort of so in the dance community, what we find is men dramatically underestimating their capacity to do the dance stuff in the participatory parts of the leadership programs. In terms of women asking to take leadership roles, I don't create scenarios to help amplify that because my goal is to create scenarios that naturally show equality. That's my goal
mhm,
because I want the experience of the training to naturally bring out the best in everybody as opposed to focusing on disparity
mhm.
and only use the disparities when there is a point to be made.
Yeah, and I'll look up say again the woman who does the, When Women Lead research?
Sally Helgeson, Helegel,
Okay,
Helgeson. She's an outstanding woman, researcher, books great, actionable, great speaker. She and I have done some work together at other conferences. She's amazing. She's my colleague in the Goldsmith 100 Coaches Project. So it's great.
great. I'll put that in our notes as well. I'd love to pivot and actually talk about your book, Restore Yourself, and hear about some of the frameworks that you use in that program.
Thank you. Restore Yourself came out in the days when I gave advice about not looking at your Blackberry too much. So it needs an update, but the concepts are still there and they're still valid, fortunately. I got lucky. The research was broad enough and sort of basic enough.
Mhm,
The research, this is based on the findings of the dissertation work on the Club Med geos and then later research and things on that.
mhm.
We don't talk about the geos in the book. So if you want to hear stories about good looking tan scuba diving instructors, they're not there. I have to write that book one day. That's not it. It's mostly, how to do this. Okay.
Right, right.
But the concept is called personal resource management. It's right. How do you manage your energy? And it's fundamentally starts with the concept that we have a myth about work life balance that keeps us from solving the problem. So that myth is that we fundamentally believe that work is depleting and non-work is restorative, right? Thank God it's Friday. Wednesday's over the hump day. I'd rather be fishing, right? Think about all the phrases we use, which really say work's no fun and, non-work is fun.
Mhm,
So if that's the case, what's wrong with the model, right? You want to take a guess? Your gut will know it. Right? It's behaviors and conditions that either restore or deplete our energies, our physical energies, our emotional energies, our cognitive, intellectual capacity, whatever dimension. It's the behaviors and conditions under which we live and engage that affect us.
mhm,
So if we can stop trying to wiggle and manage work and non work and instead actually define the question,
mhm,
or what restores and depletes me, then we can actually make some headway in solving it and addressing it.
mhm,
So that's the idea. So there are two fundamental actions that one would take. The first one is become an expert at diagnosing what restores and depletes you, but really carefully think about trying to figure out what food you're allergic to, right? You need to figure out how to isolate and categorize things you need.
mhm,
And the book helps people figure that out. The other thing you need to do is you need to manage it on a regular basis. Every day, every hour, every week, every month, at home, at work, when traveling, designing vacations, designing things. And it's, you wouldn't, every time you take an action, you kind of figure out the financial implications.
Mhm.
And every time you take an action, you figure out the implications on, your children's long-term welfare. You need to stop and do the same kind of analysis like, okay, how's this going to land in terms of my resilience, my ability or the ability of other people to actively restore themselves, or if we get people too depleted, they fall below the burnout line and then bad things happen.
Mhm. It's actually a more challenging process, I think, than many of us would readily assume, because I think that the amount of things that deplete us that optically shouldn't deplete us because of either the category or because we're very accomplished in the thing and thus we should continue doing the thing even if it is really depleting. And it makes me think a lot about just being honest, right? Like that work of just being honest with yourself and in doing that, sometimes there's friction with other people too. And is that a component that you talk about in the book? Of how do you sort of coach through that, both being honest with yourself and getting in touch with that and itemizing it, but then also moving through the world in ways that may be different from the way people knew you before, if it involves a change to avoid the burnout.
So how do you enroll people in help? In the process is not in the book. It's a nice little book. That's part of the coaching world. I do resilience coaching, and that's
Hmm.
part of helping people implement things.
Hmm.
But in order to implement, you need to understand. You need to be able to diagnose, assess and recommend.
Hmm.
So, in terms of assessment, we have an assessment in the book that helps people sort of figure out some sources of depletion and restoration for them that helps them start to use this approach.
Hmm.
There are three musketeers of resilience that I talk about. If you have the words and the ability to discuss this, you can have the conversations, right? Instead of saying, I hate it when you do this, it's easier if you say, listen, these are the behaviors and conditions that deplete me. Can we
Hmm.
change some of it around so that
Hmm.
it doesn't?
Hmm.
Or can I do it? Because for me, it's restorative. For you, it's depleting. So why don't I do it? Right. So the three musketeers of resilience, number one is that it's don't get stuck in social tags, right? It's not a commute or a vacation, right? If a commute has restorative conditions and behaviors for you, then it's restorative. It's not a negative to have a long commute. Okay. You're not a bad mommy if your kid being out is restorative. You're not a bad mommy, right? I can tell you what's restorative
Hmm.
because you've reduced the depleters, right? The cognitive load of being hypervigilant, right? Like, okay, the neighbor took the dog yesterday for an hour. And I love this dog, and I would be a mess without this dog during COVID. I can tell you exactly how I was able to restore absent the dog. So, number one, be really clear on the behaviors and conditions and don't judge them, right? Number two, they're different for everybody. If I give you warm, dry towels, sometimes I have 500 people, 700 people in a room, and I say, okay, warm, dry towels straight out of the dryer. They have to be folded and put away. For whom is this reliably restorative? A third of the room will raise their hand. And everybody will look around thinking they're the only crazy person who likes to fold towel.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Right? Why? Because I get to think, because they're warm, they feel good, the edges are square, I get to finish something,
Right.
right? Okay, and why? Okay, and then the ones who hate it, why do you hate it? Well, it's a waste of time and I can't get it right, and my wife gets mad no matter what I do, and I shouldn't, I'm too good for, right? Okay,
Yeah.
we're different. It's okay. We're different. Make use of that. If all things are equal, the people should do the restorative stuff, right? Or you should tweak it so that it feels restorative. If doing this work is cold and being cold is depleting, put on a sweater and then do it. The third thing is that they change over time.
Hmm.
And this has been very important during COVID. Okay. They change over time. So something that used to be depleting can become restorative. Cooking, cooking lunch for your kids used to be restorative until you had to do it every freaking day for a year and a half when you couldn't go pick your own vegetables because the vegetables you're getting from the delivery make you crazy because the part about that what was restorative was the creative enjoy it, right? Okay.
Hmm.
They change over time and you have to be aware because sometimes We say, "Oh, that restores me," and then it doesn't anymore. Or things that used to be depleting became restorative, right? Going to the supermarket became restorative for a lot of people because they could finally get out of the house, right? People who are novelty seekers were suffering dramatically. So, really important to sort of understand that those things. And you alluded to this, and this is related to they change over time. We can overdose.
Hmm.
Things that are restorative become depleting. You get too much of them. That's a lot of people are on overdose. Gee, I only wish I could just stay home. I travel too much. I just wish I could see more of my kids. I just wish I could work remotely more.
Hmm.
So we can overdose on anything.
Yeah.
So and it's important not to judge yourself. Listen, we are who we are. We're 50%, basically 50% nature, 50% nurture. And during a pandemic when all of your options are locked down is not the time to decide that your nature sucks and you're going to change how you nurture yourself when there are reduced options.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the challenges in this day also is this sort of happyology, Instagram visual culture that really doesn't help us get underneath the skin of what's really going on and being honest with ourselves and other people. I think that sort of works in contrast. And some people I think are, a little more stoic, probably because of their upbringing. And I think some are more able to kind of go there. I get a sense that you're not afraid to go there, and I think that's really refreshing.
I help people by helping them figure out what they need to figure out.
Yeah.
Thank you for the compliment. It's a mixed blessing in my life, but I've always had the capacity to see what people are capable of. I think if I had a message for people who are listening, it's most people at this point need to be much kinder and gentler on themselves. What you said about Instagram and Facebook creates a fake reference group. Okay. So we know look, a lot of social psychology is badly run experiments, but there are some very, very powerful, useful, well vetted social psychology things. And one of the things we know is our identities are very much shaped by the groups we're in and how they see us.
Mm.
So if you have real, genuine relationships with people who really know you, then you see them seeing you for who you are, and that's okay. If your reference group is this fake set of photographs, you know, happy faces of people who are in pain outside, and you are not allowed to be miserable. And I can speak directly to this. I was a dance teacher.
Mhm.
I made people have fun for a living. I remember the first time I was really sick and I was in a relationship and I was terrified my boyfriend would leave because I'm always I helped my mother. I helped everybody. I'm the happy, happy person. And I really didn't think that anybody cared about me enough to care about me when I sucked.
Mhm.
And so we already have that from many places. And this sort of fake reference group, right, of only showing the good stuff. So basically, that's something that we could talk about another time.
Mhm.
Boundary management. We need to very carefully manage our boundary. And again, that's that inverted U. A little bit of Facebook helps me get out of my living room to see something else until I start to see too many people with, I wasn't able to have kids. So too many people with babies and too many people with co-located boyfriends and too many right, okay, and now it's like, okay, what's the message I'm sending to myself? Ah,
Right.
look at all the things that you don't have,
Right.
and oh, I'm still in my apartment, right?
Right.
So I think having first of all, having honest conversations and being exposed to those and helping people build communities they need and being available.
And how do you restore yourself?
Ah, okay. So before COVID and now it's after, physically I swim. Cognitively cognitively is the least important because I do a lot of cognitive work, right? So
Mhm.
I get a lot of I have to learn. I'm studying social digital media marketing right now. I'm always learning something. I'm building a business. We're building an app, a resilience app. If your listeners are interested in helping us beta test it or if they need anything, to just reach out to me. Please just reach out. I'm capable of saying no, so please reach out for what you need.
Thank you.
People need to know that everybody's having a hard time. And
Mhm.
you asked me what restores me. I'm in Israel right now. We're getting back to normal. So I go to dance events. That's for me social, cognitive, tactile, physical,
Mhm.
vestibular stimulation. I swim. I go to a pool. I say hello to people. I talk to the women in the locker room. Like it's not. It's not an activity. Remember, it's behaviors and conditions. So I've created routines of actions that have a reliably restorative set of behaviors and conditions. And I fly on the trapeze
Mhm.
at least once a week. I turned out that here in Israel, I accidentally moved 20 minutes from the Hebrew Flying Trapeze, which is run by extraordinary artists and knowledgeable teachers and amazing people. And I make it a point to keep asking for help. I ask for help. I ask for help. I ask for help. I'm getting better at it. We all have to keep getting better at it. Women have to ask, men have to ask. So the best thing you can do is just ask people for help. Ask for help.
Mhm. And it sounds like you're really aware of the dose, as we were talking about before, of these behaviors and activities
And I put my friends on notice.
when they're needed.
My friends know that if I'm no, my friends know that if you see these behaviors or you hear these things come from my mouth, pick me up and take me to the pool.
Uh-huh.
Or my friends know my signals for when I need help, and I've asked them. And I think we all need that. We need, they call it a personal board of directors for business, but I think we need a personal resilience board who people who know I'm going to tell you, and they can tell you what you need to,
Yeah, it's your inner circle.
right?
Yeah. Mhm. Oh, this has been so fun.
Yeah, it's fun.
Edie, before I let you go, what advice would you give your younger self?
I think the advice just in general, based on what I'm learning and keep learning, ask for help,
Mhm.
ask for help. My grandmother, 100 years ago said everybody could use a good therapist.
Mhm.
It was before it was fashionable.
Mhm.
Ask for help. Don't get isolated. Be kind to yourself, especially women. It seems to be women are much harder on themselves. I can't say, don't worry, it'll all be okay. I can't. What I can say is we know from the research that more than 98% of what we worry about doesn't happen. So you've got math on your side, and surround yourself with people who are good for your soul and good for the life you want to live, right? People who don't get you, people who judge you, people who are mean to you, they may need to be tolerated because your safety depends on them or your financial future depends on them. But except for something that's really an emergency, do your best to add to your set nice people who are good to you. And if you don't know how to do that, reach out to me and say, okay, what can I talk to you once in a while? Like put together a women's network, have a last minute dim sum club.
Mhm.
Humans don't get isolated. And you can't see this. So this is an audio. So I'm going to have you, I'll describe an image. Okay. So I want you to hold up your right hand at your neck level. If you hold up your hand at your neck level, you think that that's the bar. That's being good enough, right? That's good enough. Okay. And you believe, actually put your hand near your nose. You believe that's the bar. Your hand is now at nose level. That's the bar. That's excellence, right? And what you believe is your capacity is at chin level. So put your left hand at your chin, left hand at your chin. Right. So you're below the bar. That's what you believe, right? So you keep trying to get yourself better. You're trying to get your left hand above your chin. Okay. You don't need to do that because in reality, take that right hand by your nose and put it at your chest. That's where the bar is. You're just wrong about where the bar is. You are enough. Yeah, you can't believe it. But the truth is, it's not that you're a big egomaniac and you're that good. It's that the bar is just lower than you think. So that's my advice.
From a flying trapeze artist, I will take it. Oh, Dr. Edie, thank you so much. I'd love to leave our listeners with ways in which they can get in touch with you, which I will include in my show notes. But if you could speak them, that would be great.
Okay, so you can reach me. I'm Edy Greenblatt, EDYGREENBLATT. You can Google me. I'll turn up. I'm on Facebook. I'm not a big social media person. If you want to, you can follow me on LinkedIn. If there's something that I can help you with, write to me, Edy Greenblatt at Gmail. Just find me, Dr. Edy, DREDY. My website is changing. So the old site's at edygreenblatt.com. The new site's at Dr. Edy Coach. I don't know. Just find me. Find me, follow me. If you can't find me, contact Sylvia at whenwomenfly.com. Find me. I'm findable. And if you're single and male and looking for someone who's a little bit crazy, call me. Call Call me. It's cool. We'll go fly on the trapeze, see what happens.
Oh my gosh. I hope this changes your life. You have been so generous and fun to talk to, and I am just really blessed. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sylvia, I've listened to your other podcasts and you're really providing a service to people. You're creating a community here. Anyone who's listening to this, you know what? This is a good woman and she's got some good advice and some great guests. So we can help you. Just let us know how we can help. Keep flying, keep soaring. We got one life. There's no dress rehearsal. Just do the best you can and stay in the air.
Thank you for listening to the When Women Fly podcast. My hope is that you leave this conversation with a sense of curiosity and empowerment to hold on to what is important and let go to what weighs you down. Stare fear in the face. If you like this episode of the When Women Fly podcast, be sure to share and subscribe and let us know what you think. We love feedback. Be brave, be bold, and fly. See you next time.